In this presentation, there's just one simple objective, and that is that we're to go over some practice translations. So how this is going to work is as you progress to the next slide, there will be some practice problems on there. Go ahead and try to work them out for yourself. And then when you're ready, move on to the next slide, and then I'll give you an explanation for how we symbolize those sentences. Now that you've had a chance to try those problems out for yourself, let's go ahead and go over them here on this slide. So again, when we're doing these translations, one of the first things you're going to want to do is probably uh, flag what the propositional letters are that you're going to be using. And typically, however they appear in the sentence, that's how you're going to end up writing them once you symbolize the sentence. So let's just look at the first one. If the pirates sail, so we see sailing, and we see raiding, and we see plundering. And so we know that we are going to have an S, oops, an S, an R, and a P. So just right off the bat, that's what you can do to sort of help yourself out. Now let's look at the sentence itself. If the pirates sail, well, right there is one of our keywords. We see an if. If the pirates sail, and there's another one of our keywords, and raid, then that's what's pairing up with our if. We should have recognized that was probably coming. The pirates plunder. So right there we see two different operators that should be working in this sentence. We see an if then, which will be symbolized by the arrow, and then we'll also see an and, which is going to be symbolized with the ampersand. So let's look at where these are going to occur. We see if the pirates sail and raid, so the ampersand is going to put the S and R together. Then the pirates plunder. So we know that the then, if then, the arrow will go right there. Typically, wherever you see the then, that is where the arrow will be symbolized in the sentence. Most instances will be that way. I can't think of any off the top of my head in which the arrow would appear anywhere other than where you see the then. Just the if then are usually paired to give you an idea that an arrow is coming. So now we have to figure out where our parentheses go, because if you remember, if you have more than two propositional letters, then you're going to need to have some parentheses to offset where the operators are and where the propositions are. So looking at the sentence, we see if the pirates sail and raid, then the pirates plunder. So again, the comma is probably going to be our most helpful tool here. And the if then are sort of signifying different parts of the conditional clause. So if the pirates sail and raid, comma, so these two are going to be together, then the pirates plunder. So we would need to symbolize it like that, because if we symbolized it the other way, if we did this instead, then that would read the pirates sail, and if the pirates raid, then they'll plunder, which is just different compared to what we're trying to convey with the actual sentence itself. This would make it a conjunction, whereas the sentence is saying, if they do this, then this will happen. So fundamentally different types of sentences, so we need to make sure that we put the parentheses in the right spot, and that is where we'll end up putting them. So let's move on to the second one. The second one, again, let's just start by flagging what our letters are that we'll need. I see raid, I see sail, I see bury the treasure. So I see three of the letters that we're going to need. And we can go ahead and write those down. We can put R, S, T. Now let's look for operators. Let's go back through. The pirates raid and, there's an and, sail if and only if, Remember, that is all one keyword identifying the double arrow. And then don't has the not included in it. So we have three different ones here. We have an ampersand for the raid and sale. We have an if and only if, which is going to be our double arrow. And then we have a don't, which is going to be a tilde. That. Come on. There we go. Okay. So that's again just starting with the propositional letters, propositional statements, and then moving to the operators, and then finally we got to do our parentheses. So let's look at how this sentence reads. The pirates raid and sail if and only if the pirates don't bury the treasure. So here again, raiding and sailing seem to go together. It's saying that if they do these two things, then they don't bury the treasure. So if that's the case, we would want to put the parentheses around these two. The pirates raid and sail if and only if the pirates don't bury the treasure. Again, if we were to do it the other way, it would read the pirates raid and they sail if and only if they don't bury the treasure. But there's a subtlety there, and it matters in logic how we formalize this because it changes how we can apply our rules. But again, I think intuitively it makes sense that the ampersand between the R and the S, that's going to be one part of the whole clause. It's saying if these two things happen, then this other thing won't happen. If and only if this other thing doesn't happen. So that seems to be the most reasonable way to symbolize that sentence. So let's move on to the third one. So again, let's just start with finding our letters. We have raid, we have plunder, we have sail, and then we also have plunder again. So we'll have an R, P, an S, and a P. Now let's go back through. Let's look for our operators. We have or, we have don't, we have another or, we have an if, which is coupled by an then. So we have quite a few different operators here. We have the first one we're looking at is an or. Then we have that don't, which suggests that there's a negation. And then we have another or. And then we have an if then. So I didn't get my tilde. All right. So again, we have rating, we have an or, we have a don't, we have an or, then we have an if then. So there's all the different operators that we'll need in this sentence. And now we have to just go through and determine how we're going to partition it out using our parentheses. So the pirates raid or don't plunder, and we have a comma. And if you remember, commas usually signify that there's going to be parentheses offsetting that as a single sentence. So we can just go ahead and use that comma as an indicator that we're going to put the parentheses around that. And then let's look at the second half, because remember, we still need to have parentheses to offset this other, or this right side of the wedge, because we have multiple operators working on the S right now. We have the wedge on the left of it, and we have the arrow on the right of it. We need to make sure that there's only one operator tied to it and another letter, or another statement, I should say. So if we're looking at the rest of the sentence, the comma told us that the R, wedge, not P went together. The other side of the comma should tell us that this is a whole statement itself too. if the pirates sail, then the pirates plunder. And so if we formalize it in this way, it seems to make the most sense. And what's giving us our basic clues is the comma that's operating halfway through in this sentence. The pirates raid or don't plunder, comma, or if the pirates sail, then the pirates plunder. So those are the symbolizations for those examples. Go ahead and try this next set as well. Now that you've gotten a chance to practice these other sets of problems, let's go through them here again and just try to identify different sort of uh, helpful ways in which you can make this easier on yourself. So again, as I've told you before, I think the easiest thing to do is to start by identifying the letters that you'll need. So the first one, we see plunder, we see sail, we see raid. So we know we're going to need P, S, R. Now, let's go back through and look for our quantifier or our operators here. And so we have a not, we have an either or, so those two go together, and then we have a but. So those are all of our operators. Now, one thing I didn't mention in the previous lecture, but I wanted to sort of just work it into this lecture, is we see this phrase all together. It is not the case. It is not the case as telling you that the tilde or the negation applies to everything that's going to follow after that. So in this instance, we're going to put a tilde out here in front. But I'll tell you right now that this is saying all of this is not the case. Whatever we're about ready to symbolize, tilde it. It's negated. It's not that. So that's what you should be thinking whenever you see it's not the case. There's going to be a couple more examples in this lecture and in the next lecture, trying to highlight this use of the term, so and then you know how it gets applied in all the other translations. But just remember, it's not the case is saying everything that's about ready to follow after this statement is going to be put in parentheses and a tilde is going to be put in front of it. So now, what else do we see? We see an either or, and we see a but, and a but is just an ampersand. So now we still need our sets of parentheses. So here again, I think the easiest way to determine where the parentheses go is by the comma that we see between the sail and the but. So it is not the case that either the pirates plunder or sail, comma, but the pirates do raid. So here in this instance, we're probably going to put parentheses here. Because right there's our comma. We see that there's a comma here, either or, and then comma. But we also need another parentheses here. So, and then we can be able to say that this is one thing by itself. This P or S is one by itself. And then this is something by itself. So again, when we read this sentence, it's saying it's not the case that either the pirates plunder or they sail, but the pirates do raid. So we have to have the tilde applying to everything, which is why we see the first set of parentheses that I'll highlight here in the orange. So we have this set of parentheses here. But we also need the interior parentheses marked out by the green there. So this is one of the first instances in which you see that we need to have multiple sets of parentheses at a time to be able to offset different things. When we move on to truth trees, I'll be telling you about main operators and how that is an important part of this as well. So that is the first one. So let's look at the second one. So we have pirate sail. We have plunder and raid. So we got S, P, R. And now we see the pirate sail if and only if. So if and only if is our double arrow. Again, we see it is not the case that pirates plunder and raid. So we see, again, double arrow. We see a not. We see an ampersand. Now we got to figure out where our parentheses go. So the pirates sail if and only if it is not the case. So remember that this it is not the case is saying everything that follows after this is going to be negated. So we know already that this has to go together. And since there's nothing else that we need to add, uh, you know, because there aren't, there's just the two. There's the P and the R, so there's not a third letter. There's not a second operator. So the parentheses will just go around that. But again, this it is not the case is supposed to signify that everything after this sentence is negated. It's going to go in parentheses and then it's negated. And I just realized now that I skipped over number 2, so I'll go back over and do number 2 right now. So looking at number 2, plunder, sail, and bury the treasure. So we're going to have P, S, and T. Let's go back through and look for our for our operators. So we've got an either there that we know is going to get matched up with an or. So we know all of this. And then we see an if then, which we know we're going to get matched up for an arrow. And then that should be it. So we have an either if the pirates plunder, then the pirates sail. So the plunder then sail should tell us that our arrow is going to go in between there. And then our or that happens after our comma is going to go right there. Again, we need parentheses, and it should be pretty obvious where this or where these parentheses go because we have a comma. We have if the pirates plunder, then the pirates sail, comma, or the pirates bury the treasure. So the comma is going to tell us that everything to the left of it needs to go together and everything to the right of it needs to go together. And so that's how we would symbolize that sentence there. So again, try the next set of practice problems, and then when you're ready, move on to the explanation form. Now let's go over these practice problems. So again, this is just going to be nothing but repetition. Just keep doing the same process that we have been doing by starting with identifying which letters we'll need. So looking at the first sentence, we have bury the treasure, we have plunder, and we have sail. So let's do T, P, S. Now let's go back through and look for our operators. The pirates bury the treasure, but it is not the case. Remember, we want to flag that whole thing, but it is not the case that if the pirates plunder, and then we have an implied then that's right here, we have an if then, they sail. So even though the then's not there, it's implied. There's the idea that if this thing happens, then this thing. So going back through, we have a but, which is our ampersand. We have it's not the case. So we have a tilde. Then we have an if then statement. If then. And that should be all of our operators. So now we gotta go back through and look for our parentheses. I told you before that we know that the if or it is not the case is going to identify that everything to the right of that statement is going to be put in parentheses. And so even though we have that comma there after the but, we don't really, I mean, we have two indications as to where the parentheses go. We have the it is not the case, because then we know that everything that follows after that needs parentheses around it and a tilde in front of it. But we also have the comma that is right after or right before the but, that would indicate that that's where the uh, conjunction is going to come together at, or where we're going to have parentheses on one side and another term on the other side. So that's how we symbolize that one. Let's go on to the next one. We have sail plunder. That looks like it. So we have an S and a P. And then we have an either or. And we have a don't. So we know that we've got a wedge and then a tilde. And that should be it. There are no parentheses that are needed because, again, there's only one operator that is connecting the two of them, which is our wedge. The tilde is an operator, but it can act on a single letter like it is in this case. So we have either the pirates sail or the pirates don't plunder, one or the other. Let's do the third one. Same as before. We have sail. We have plunder and raid. We have, and it is not the case, we have an if and only if, and we have a both and, which those just go together. So we've got an S, P, and R. We know that we have a tilde here, and it's going over everything. We have an if and only if. We have an and. We still need another set of parentheses because we have this P that has the double arrow on one side and we have the ampersand on the other side, so we need another set of parentheses. In this instance, what's going to signify where we need the parentheses is going to be this both and. It's saying that this ampersand is connecting these two things, and the both is saying that they go together. So we have another set of parentheses that we need to put there. So it is not the case, tilde going over everything. The pirate if, or that the pirates sail, if and only if, are double arrow. The pirates both plunder and raid. So those are the solutions for those this group of problems. Go ahead and try the next ones. Again, let's just follow our process here with how we solve these translations. So beginning with identifying the letters that we'll need, we have a sail, a raid, bury the treasure. So we know we need S, R, T. Looking for our operators, we have an if, then. We have a neither nor. So those two go together. And then that should be it. So let's read the sentence. If the pirates neither sail nor raid. Actually, I should have mentioned neither and nor are both negations, correct? It's not either or, it's neither nor. So there is a negation that's built into these two. So these are actually counting as two different ones. So we have neither S nor R. And neither nor is like either or, just the negated version of it. So we put a wedge between them. And then we have our if then. And so in this instance, we should, again, look for where our parentheses go. And the indicator here is that we have a comma that's helping us out. So we see a comma right before the then. So parentheses will just go there. So what this one's supposed to show you is with the neither nor, it's either or, but the negated versions for both sides, or disjuncts as we would call them. So we have neither S nor R, and then arrow T. So let's move on to the second one. Let's see, we have sail, plunder, bury the treasure. So we have S, P, T. So let's go back through and look for our operators. We have but, we also have a don't, we have an if and only if, and we have another don't. So going through here, we have a but, which is an and. We have a don't, which is a tilde. We have an if and only if, which is a double arrow. And we have a don't, which is another tilde. Let's see if I can fix that. There we go. Now we just need to figure out where our parentheses go. Maybe the first thing we could look for, see if there's a comma. We don't see a comma. So let's just read the sentence and see if we can understand implicitly where this break is supposed to be in the sentence to put our parentheses. So the pirates sail but don't plunder if and only if they don't bury the treasure. So it seems like this but, this conjunction here, are putting these things together and then reading into it that those things have to go together to make this biconditional, this double arrow. In most instances, that's how it's going to be. Most conjunctions are going to sound like they go together and then separate them from the other operator, which in this case, it seems to work. So yeah, even though there's not a comma there, you have to sort of read into the sentence and decide what you think the sentence is trying to get at, and then put in there where you think the parentheses should go. There's obviously a set of parentheses that need to go in there, and so that seems to be the best place to place them. Now, let's do the third one. So, oops, got ahead of myself. So we have sail, we have raid, we have plunder, and we have bury the treasure. So we've got S, R, P, T. We have if, I'm sure there's a then. So we got an if then. We have a don't. We have a do. We have they plunder, and we have an and. Oh, and we also have a but right there. So if the pirates don't sail but do raid, then they plunder and bury the treasure. So we have an if then. It looks like the then is going to go a little bit later, so let's look at what else we have. Pirates don't sail, but they do raid. And then we have our if then, we have our then, and then we have our ampersand here. And do we have a, nope, we don't have a negation. So now we just got to figure out where our parentheses go. It looks like we have a comma with our if then. It looks like we have, I think, so we have this. This is the first step you're going to get to because we do have the comma. We know that those two go together. If the pirates don't sail but do raid. And again, that but is sort of carrying those two together. And then so now we still have another set of parentheses that we need to identify somewhere. So reading the sentence, if the pirates don't sail but do raid, then they plunder. So we could do that. And then and bury the treasure. Or we could do it this way. Either or would probably work in this case because that and doesn't have the both and. We just have, you know, an arrow and it's saying this arrow goes to this. And so it seems like we could have either one here. It does matter logically how we render it, but there's an argument that could be made for both of them. So if it was me, I would render it like this. I think this makes the most sense because if the pirates don't sail but do raid, then they plunder and bury the treasure. But there is a way in which you could make a claim that this is also the way to render it. So either way uh, would probably do in this case. We'll do these final set of problems in this presentation, and then we'll do another lecture on the different translations just as another practice set. But then after that presentation, after the next one, we'll move on to truth trees. But let's go ahead and finish up this lecture and look at these last three sentences. So again, let's just use the same process as we have been using. We look for where our letters are. We see plunder, we see sail, we see raid. So we know that we have a P, we have an S, and we have an R. So let's go through and see where our operators are. We have an or, we have an it's not the case, and we have an if then. So let's go ahead and put those in. We have an or, we have an it's not the case, we have a, and again, we have an it's not the case, so we know that the parentheses are going to go over everything that follows after that is not the case. So that's how we symbolize that one. There's nothing else that we need, sort of basic and simple. Let's look at the next one. We have plunder, we have sail, we have bury the treasure. So we've got P, oops, let's change that up. So we've got P, S, and T. Let's look at our operators. We have an or, we have another or. So we have two ors. Anything else? Now, we do have the comma here, so that should be telling us where our parentheses go. So our parentheses should go here and here, because the comma is telling us that everything to the right is one part of the clause and everything to the left is another part of the clause. So that's another simple one. Now let's do the third one. We have sail, we have raid, we have sail, we have raid. So we have SR, SR. Going back through, we have an either or. We have a but, we have a don't, we have a don't, and another but. So let's go ahead. We're going to skip this either for right now, the pirates sail but. So we got an ampersand, don't, raid, or they don't sail, but they do raid. And this is another ampersand. Now let's look at where our parentheses go. Do we have any commas? No. But we do have this either or statement. So whenever you see an either or statement, just like a both and statement, you could say that whatever's on the left side of one, that's saying either this side or this side. So the either or is supposed to indicate that the pirates sailing but not raiding go together, and then we have the sail or don't sail but do raid that go together. And that's how we would symbolize that one. So those are the practice problems. Like I said, we'll do another lecture filled with practice problems, and then we'll move on to truth trees from that. So until next time.